Have Mr. O'Neill, there's Mr. Dawson, there's Mr. O'Neill over here, and Mrs. Olszewski. All right. Have you guys decided who's going first, or am I supposed to decide that? Why don't we just go in the order that's here? Is that all right? I know you did. I'm sorry. Okay. All right, well, come on over.
All right, thanks all for being here. All right, so I'm not sure when exactly I realized that everything would work out, that everything would not work out the way I expected, but also that, for better or worse, I would never die. I'm not sure if it was when everyone in the guard room raised their Kalashnikovs at me, or maybe it was when the one guy pressed the barrel of his gun right at my throat, or maybe later when I got yanked off a moving motorcycle. But one thing was clear: everything I did was stupid, and also everything somehow would keep moving forward. Not clear if it'd be for better or worse. Let me back up. I was in Yemen, attempting journalism. I was a freelancer, no institutional backing, no credentials, anything else that might engender some trust. This was a long time ago, obviously. I was young, with the passion of youth, the certainty of inexperience, and the confidence of idiocy. But that's all okay. That's what being young is supposed to be like. Things should move both fast and slow, with a hot-tempered speed, but knowledge that life is stretching out over some vast, unknowable horizon. That possibilities were limitless, that trying something dumb would succeed. So I decided to do something really dumb and foreshorten that horizon. So while I was there, the country was rocked by the news that the US had designated this popular cleric, this guy named Abdul-Majid al-Zindani, as a global terrorist. Now, he was a political leader, he was a beloved religious figure, a prominent revolutionary, and maybe dabbled in some light terrorism. But still, the designation seemed really unfair to the Yemeni people, and I mostly agreed with them. I thought it'd be great to get on his side, tell his side of the story, maybe ease US-Yemeni tensions, maybe envisioned it maybe making my career as a writer. I had high hopes, partly noble, but also largely selfish. So I took a bus to the far suburbs of the capital, the university that he ran and lived at. Everyone around there was very friendly, everyone is a human being, This was still not a great specific place to be an American wandering the streets. Most people regard me with curiosity, but whatever, that's the job, or if not job in the paying sense of journalism. Along the way, I stopped at a couple bookshops to buy some of the man's sermons, both for research and to show that I was genuinely interested in him. Interested enough to buy something 10 minutes before I showed up. It's like grabbing a souvenir from the airport gift shop, like, oh, this package of Rolaids shows I love you. It turns out that wasn't the winning strategy. When I got to the guardhouse leading up to the university, it began to dawn on me that my strategic failures were less in the last 10 minutes and more what scholars of military history call the entire damn idea. So I got there and said hello, starting with pleasantries in my middling Arabic. These pleasantries were cut a little bit short by all of them picking up their guns and pointing them at me. Now, in my defense, I sort of expected this, and I told them I was there to interview, Cleric Zindani, so he could explain himself to America, get his story out, let the truth ring from every bell tower and sound in every public square, really high-minded, noble ideas. And you might be saying, how would you do this? You're a freelancer. There wasn't even any guarantee that your story would be published. And that's a good question, and they had roughly the same ones. And I couldn't answer that exactly, except that I believed, and still honestly do, that someone would be interested. Surprisingly, this didn't work exactly. I began to realize I was just an unnamed American, showing up uninvited, with no credentials, to their home, to where they lived, to where they were scared of something happening. No connections, no one to vouch for me. At the home of someone my country, which had just recently invaded Iraq, had raised to the same level of Osama bin Laden. The same someone these men were paid to guard, and also who presumably really believed in him. Now, I can see why they thought I might have been a spy or assassin. Granted, if I were a spy or an assassin, I was being a really dumb one. But that would have been easy to believe, since, regardless of what I was doing, I was clearly extremely dumb. This point was hammered home in a manner that really went a long way towards bridging the language gap, where the lead guard pressed the barrel of his gun into my throat. This I took as a universal message. At that point, we reached an understanding that transcended the divide of culture and language and our different countries, and that understanding was, get the hell out, now. I did, and everything seemed darker. The curious stares I had gotten on the way in seemed more menacing. The shopkeepers didn't seem as eager for my purchases. This was probably in my imagination, but even if it wasn't, it was definitely deserved. Because, after all, what was I doing there? just imposing my ambition into an already fraught situation. It was the solipsistic peril of journalism, the vampiric reality of writing about conflict, the dumb swagger that comes with being part of an empire, the headstrong naivete of youth. I jumped on a motorcycle taxi and sped back into the city, hanging on to the back as my adrenaline seeped away and was replaced with an emotion both giddy and melancholic. We went faster and faster, but I knew life would never be lived again at the same naive and hopeful pace. I knew that who I hoped to be could founder at any minute, could disappear with the rapidity of a trigger or the slow decline of plans that never succeed. The wind whipped at my face as we moved through the ancient city. Life went faster then, faster and slower. Thanks.
All right, hi, welcome everyone. In a world that requires me to keep moving and pressing on, it's rare for me to be granted the gift to pause and write my thoughts. So I think about my past, I immediately think of Pete, the man who has walked almost every step of my life with me since I was 15 years old. My husband, my best friend, and the man some of you know as Mr. O. I stand before you to tell you a tale that you may wonder, did this actually happen? And so I'll let you decide if you believe my story of the night Pete should have died. Nikki, hurry, we're gonna miss it, says Pete, my boyfriend of 3 years. It is Friday night and we're on our way to a dance performance at the college we attend. As we settle in our seats and look at the program, the lights dim and the show begins. Somewhere in the middle, Pete leans over and quietly says, "Is it normal to see purple dots? You know, the kind when you look into a bright light?" "Well, no, in fact," I say, "it is not normal." And the show goes on. After the show, we split up and headed to our separate dorm rooms to change into casual clothes. Flash forward 30 minutes, and I'm walking back into Pete's dorm room and see him lying on the couch with his eyes closed and sweat dripping down his forehead. What? I just saw him. I touched his forehead, and boy, was it hot. "What are your symptoms?" I ask. And he said, "Still seeing purple dots, my back really hurts, I think I have a fever, and my head is pounding." I found a thermometer, took his temp, and yup, 102 fever. Yikes. So I give him some Tylenol, break open the ice bag, and put it on his neck and settle in for a long Friday night. The next morning, he's still not feeling well, so I stay and continue with the ice pack and Tylenol regime. At 10 a.m., he had trouble breathing, and the paramedics were called. After examining him, they said he was fine and to monitor his breathing. I said, "What? Monitor his breathing?" And then a memory smacks me. "You know," I tell the paramedics, "I saw a sign for meningitis symptoms around campus a few weeks ago, and he has quite a few of them. Could it be that?" "Nah, he's fine," they say, and leave. Well, okay then. At around 10 p.m. on Saturday night, Pete starts moaning. You know that moan when you get so sick, that's all you do is moan? He says to turn off the lights, it's too bright, his head is pounding. I take his temp, 104.9 degrees now. And I start thinking, don't you die at like 105? So I'm panicking. What do? The paramedics were already here and said he was fine. So 18-year-old me steps into the hallway and calls my mom to ask what to do. Then she's like, well, if he throws up, take him to the hospital for a migraine. I walk back into his room and find him heaving into a garbage can. Okay, hear you loud and clear, universe. To the hospital we go. So have you ever heard of those stories where people get superhuman strength in times of crisis? Well, sleep-deprived me, who was exhausted and panicking, drapes a 200-pound moaning Pete over my shoulders and hoof it down 3 flights of stairs out to my car, feet dragging behind him. I buckle him in with shaking arms and jump in and start driving to the hospital. A strange thing happens, though, as I'm making the turn out of the dorm parking lot. I find it's really hard to turn my steering wheel. Great! The power steering just went out in my car. So I'm in my car, barely able to turn the wheel, when all goes quiet, and Pete stops moaning. Oh no, is he dead, I think? So now I'm crying, trying to steal the car with one hand, without power steering, and I'm shaking him with the other, trying to see if he's still alive, when he says, my bell hurts. What? What is he talking about? And then he just keeps repeating, my bell hurts, my bell hurts. Is he hearing ringing? By the grace of God, I made it to the hospital, dragged us into the emergency room, and he gets immediately rushed to a room where a doctor asked me the symptoms. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, Pete starts convulsing on the bed. 2 nurses and a police officer rush into the room and strap him down to the bed. And so now I'm crying. You know that cry, the ugly cry? So another nurse comes in the room and shuffles me out. Probably a good call. I was not helping anyone at that point. So now it's Saturday night, midnight, and the doc comes to the waiting room and tells me he thinks Pete has meningitis, a sickness that causes rapid, severe inflammation of the membranes surrounding the brain and the spinal cord, oftentimes killing people within hours. At this point, I want to wring the paramedics' necks from this morning. To think he could have been treated hours before if they would have listened to me. The doctor informed me that Pete will be helicoptered to the University of Iowa Hospital, and it does not look good. So now I'm racing back to the dorms to gather some clothes, and as I pull into the parking lot, my car stalls and coasts into the spot. So I grab a couple of friends, grab my bags, and grab Mr. O's car to drive back to the dorms, or to drive back to Iowa. So on Wednesday, the 3rd day of being unconscious, and the 6th day since the onset of symptoms, Pete's parents brought in a priest because they thought he was dying. In the middle of the priest reciting the death passage, you know the one, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Yeah, that one. Well, in the middle of that passage, Pete opens his eyes. He's in a sterile white room and hears the priest and sees the bright light, and he just says, "Am I dying? Am I dead? What the hell is going on here?" Well, he spent the next 2 weeks recovering in the hospital. Turns out the last thing Pete remembers is being at the dance show on Friday night. Turns out he should have died, and the docs think the only reason he lived was because I brought him in when I did, and his body was able to shed 30 pounds needed to fight the sickness in those first 3 days. Side note, if you know Mr. O, this is why he says it's important to carry around a little more weight. You never know when you're going to need it. And, side note, the mechanic who fixed the power steering in my car said that it should have died and never drove at all that day. So I stand before you after telling this tale with unbelievable twists and turns, and I ask you, did this actually happen? Thank you.
This is the story of the first and only time that I ever visited New York City. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Dawson. I've been at Libertyville High School for 33 years, teaching chemistry and physics. I'm currently the science department chair. I have 3 children of my own. They're all grown adults at this point. And my only trip to New York City happened 10 years ago when my daughter Lily was still in high school in Kenosha, where I live. Lily, she's the most artistic of my children, and she got involved in dance and music at a young age. When she was in high school, she tried out for the district musical and made the ensemble cast as a freshman. She loved the experience so much that she continued to try out, and she performed in every musical performed in Kenosha Unified School District throughout her 4 years of high school. Prior to her getting involved in musical theater, I was basically a science and sports fanatic, but as the parent of a performer, I started seeing a lot more musicals, and I gained an appreciation for the talent and the passion that goes into making a musical performance. In the winter of 2015, my daughter performed in the musical Hello, Dolly. I wrote to the cast of the Broadway performance and asked if they would send me a picture that I could give to my daughter. They ended up sending me an autographed playbill, and I got it framed, and I gave it to her on her birthday, and she really loved it. In the winter of 2016, another opportunity arose, and I knew it could be potentially even more special. A former student of mine named Philippa Sue, she went by Pippa, was performing in a musical in New York City that was about to move from off-Broadway to on-Broadway. I knew Pippa from when she was a student in my class, but I would not say that we were close. She was a good student, but she was more interested in fine arts and performing than she was in physics. As I remember it, she enjoyed discussions and presentations in class much more than she enjoyed the math problems. Pippa had been a star in the musicals at Libertyville, so several teachers in the building had followed her progress through college at Juilliard in New York, and then onto the professional stage. One of my teaching colleagues told me in February of 2016 that Pippa's new musical called Hamilton was going to move to a big Broadway theater in the summer, and that the tickets were about to go on sale. I asked my wife and daughter if they were interested in making a trip that summer to New York City, and they jumped at the chance. So we made plans to travel to New York in the summer of 2016, and we bought Broadway Hamilton tickets on the first day that they were released. I have to remind you that when this happened, Hamilton was not Hamilton. It was a brand new musical at the time. It had just opened off-Broadway, and it was starting to get a little buzz, but it was not the worldwide sensation that it would eventually become. None of us had ever heard of it or had any idea what it would be like, but the opportunity to go to a Broadway musical when you knew one of the lead actors, it was just so enticing. I was able to contact Pippa before we went to New York, and she generously offered to let us come meet her and the cast backstage after the performance. My daughter was thrilled. The anticipation just grew larger over the months between we making the plan and then heading to the big city. So in the middle of June, we flew to New York City, took a harrowing cab ride to our downtown hotel, and started to explore. We walked the famous streets, which were hot and muggy and actually pretty stinky in the summer, and we marveled at the architecture and the sheer size of the city. I have to say, there were a million impressive and interesting things in New York City, but it also felt a little grimy and kind of aggressive, so it was difficult for me to actually settle in and feel completely comfortable. If you've never been to New York City, I recommend putting it on your bucket list though. It's gotta be a thing you do at least once, just to see if you love it or if you hate it. The Big Apple, definitely a spectacle, and it's a unique place in this world. So on the second evening that we were in New York, we went to the theater plenty early to make sure that we were there on time. The marquee in the front was amazing, and it reminded me of so many scenes that I had seen in TV and movies. We had balcony seats that were miles from the stage, but the inside of the theater was amazing in its grandeur and its detailing. The show was an absolute thrill. The music, the acting, the stage effects, it was all way beyond what I expected. Pippa was amazing as Eliza Schuyler, and the rest of the cast, including Lin-Manuel Miranda, Leslie Odom, Daveed Diggs, they all blew me away. When the show was over, we went back out the main entrance and around the right side of the building to the cast entrance door, where a small crowd of people had already assembled to wait for the cast to exit. We gave our names to the guard, and he led us inside, and a stagehand escorted us through the backstage area and onto the actual stage to wait. This is where the whole experience changed for me. The cast had not yet returned, but there were about 20 other people like us who had been given backstage passes. And right there in front of us was Mythbuster Adam Savage. Now, I don't know if you remember the original Mythbusters, Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman, but those two guys were legends in the science teacher world. Those guys had been cranking out scientific method TV shows for a decade. Every middle and high school science teacher in America thought of them as a close friend just because they had made substitute lesson plans for us automatic. I poked my daughter and I said, "That's Adam Savage, the Mythbuster." She just laughed. My wife encouraged me to go say hi to him. So I got up my nerve and I walked right up to him and introduced myself. I'm sure I was awkward and nervous, but he could not have been nicer. He started right in talking to me about all the amazing props, the effects technology, everything on the stage. He actually said he wished he could take a bunch of it home to play with. He was so excited to talk about the geeky science stuff with me that we laughed and talked for like 10 minutes straight. When the cast eventually made it back out on the stage, I shook his hand, I wished him the best, and we went to meet Pippa and her colleagues with the rest of my family. Everybody was super friendly, and they were so encouraging to my daughter. It was a memory of a lifetime for her as a young high school performer. So we left for home the next morning, and as we talked about the trip, I realized that meeting a Mythbuster was actually my favorite part. We walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, we wandered through the Met, we went to the circus atmosphere in Times Square, and I saw my first Broadway show. And those were all amazing highlights, but those things I kind of expected. And somehow the utter surprise of getting to meet and talk to Adam Savage, it was just more special to me. So overall, my wife and I decided we did not love New York City, and we have never gone back. But I'll never forget, my one trip to New York City was the time I got to meet a Mythbuster.
Who? Okay, cool. Do you all have a microphone over there? Yep, okay.
I don't know if, oh, now it's working.
Okay. Well, so this is the point where you all get to ask questions. You can ask the whole group, you can ask someone individually to try and find a hole in their story, whatever. I'll be walking around and you just kind of shout it out, and then if we can't hear you, I'll repeat it in the microphone and make sure everybody can hear your question. So after we ask some questions and get some answers from our 3 faculty members here, we'll find out who the liar really is, start trying to figure it out if you haven't already, and who has a question for any of them. Oh, in the back, yeah. The question is, how good do you think you are at lying?
Well, I laugh a lot, so I don't know if that's telling or not. I try to be a good liar. I don't know if I'm as great as a liar as I think I am. I don't know.
I don't think I'm a great liar. Depends on the lie, though. So little white lies, I can probably pull off.
I have never told a lie.
Until then. All right. How about another question? Could be just for a particular person trying to find a hole in their story. Oh, in the back over there. Go ahead.
Shwaya bes. That means only a little, and so no. Functionally, no, not anymore. That was a long time ago. Ana bakalam Arabi laka shwaya bes, which is a very bad accent of saying I speak Arabic, but only a tiny little bit.
Okay. Did that satisfy? All right. Another question.
How long was Mr. O at Stevens Point?
He was at Stevens Point for 1 year and then transferred over to Augustana for 3rd trimester of his sophomore year. So I guess he was there for 1.5 years at Stevens Point and then transferred to Augustana his sophomore year, where he got sick with meningitis.
Any other questions? Oh, here we go. Yep. How tall is Pippa Sue?
So she's a little bit shorter than me. I guess probably 5'6". She's not short, like for a woman, but she's a little shorter than me.
All right. Any other questions? Yes.
Did you say you were 18 when Mr. Rowe had his case?
I was 18. Yep. Is there a follow-up question on that? I'll preface that by saying the school cutoff was a lot earlier back then. So I think our current cutoff for age for grades is August, but back when I was in school, it was December. If that helps.
Oh, question up here. Did you cramp up after lifting Mr. O and dragging him down 3 flights of stairs?
You
and all
know,
that?
I was really shaky, but surprisingly, no. I think that even more than dragging 200-pound Mr. O down the stairs, which I keep saying his weight, I'm sure he's thrilled about that. It was honestly the steering wheel. If you have never driven a car without power steering, it is really hard to do, especially one-handed.
All right. Any other questions? Or are we ready for you guys to do your voting? See if you can figure it out. Okay. All right. So what we do is by way of the like how loud the applause are. That's how we basically figure out what you guys think. So get ready to clap very loudly when I have the person who you think is the liar. Like we'll do it that way. So let's go in order that they went. So I'm going to say, if you think Mr. O'Neill was the liar, you're going to clap. But if you don't think it's him, save your applause. Or if you just think, well, maybe even clap a little bit, whatever. Okay. But I'm going to try and judge who gets the loudest applause, and that's the person you think is the liar. All right. Are we good? Yes. All right. So if you think that Mr. O'Neill is the liar, clap now. Okay. Second, we had Miss Olszewski. Do you think she's a liar? Pretty close. How about Mr. Dawson? All right. I kind of thought that Pete won that one. Am I wrong? I thought that he had the loudest applause. But let's find out. At this point, I'm going to ask the true liar. That's the dumbest thing I've ever said. I'm going to ask the liar to reveal themselves. So, on the count of three, the liar is 1, 2, 3. All right. If you thought it was Mr. Dawson, you can give yourself a round of applause as well. But let's thank all three of our participants for participating in Two Truths and a Lie. Thank you guys. Great job, all three of you. You guys want to stay up here, you're welcome to. If you want to...
For those of you that are interested, I stole that story from one of the other teachers in the building. So that story of going backstage, meeting Adam Savage at Hamilton, that's actually a story that Miss Torrance did. So you can ask her if you want more details about how that whole experience went. I just stole her story.
All right. Thanks very much. We have one more teacher coming out for you, and this is Megan Lavery, who you guys know is maybe a PE teacher. She used to be an English teacher, and she's an incredible storyteller. She does something we call MOTH storytelling, and if you are a sophomore, then maybe you did some MOTH storytelling at the end of last year, and if you are a freshman, then you're going to do some MOTH storytelling next month. So yay. All right. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Miss Lavery. I teach health and I'm the equity coordinator, which means I get to see so many freshmen kind of like grow and thrive through their 4 years at Libertyville. I was an English teacher for 20 years though before becoming a health teacher. And one of the things that I was having a hard time with was that creative side of myself. And I feel like kind of my whole life, I've struggled with this idea of being an athlete and also being creative. And growing up in a small town, those two things really didn't work together. You really were forced into being one or the other. So these are some pictures. This is when I won the Grand Slam in Chicago. NPR is a radio station that sponsors what's called the MOTH Radio Hour. And I actually told this story the day that I accepted the job at Libertyville High School. I was sitting at the restaurant beforehand and got the call from Mrs. Amon, and I was like, I already won today. I don't even care how I do in this competition. And then I ended up winning, which was pretty fun thing. So we have kind of a shortened amount of time, so I'm gonna fly through some of the things that I intended to say. But I've done storytelling competitions I'm gonna take this out, at local venues like Evanston Space, at Lincoln Hall in the city. And when you win one of those, you get to go on to the Grand Slam, which is all of the winners from the year in Chicago competing against each other. And apparently, I'm not much on the TikTok, but a couple of years ago, some students were like, Mrs. Lavery, your video came up in my feed on TikTok. So I looked and I have like 1 or 1.7 million viewers from a story I told about actually school lockdown drills and how when they first started happening, they were very intense and very scary. And students and I were all kind of freaked out in this like collective fear of this new world we were kind of walking into. Like I said, growing up, I had this dichotomy of being a talented athlete. I played Division I softball, I'm good at it, but also feeling like maybe the more authentic me was like a creative theater kid. And I never really got to experience that. But growing up, I had all of these like markers in my life where I won a young authors competition and got to read a poem I wrote about the ballerina that couldn't dance. When I was in 3rd grade, I got published in the newspaper for a poem about Halley's Comet. I wrote a rap for my 5th grade talent show. I loved passing notes and writing notes in class. We didn't have texting in the 90s. I always kept a journal. And then my senior year in my AP rhetoric class, my teacher was really trying to reinforce that like I had a talent and that I should really look at doing something with writing when I got into college. So these are just some pictures of that. And as I've been engaged in storytelling across the Chicago area, I have found that hearing people's stories is really what I think the most important thing to kind of like heal the world that we're living in. When you hear someone's story, when you know where they come from, when you know what they're about, it makes it a lot harder to not like them. It builds empathy and compassion in ways that I don't think anything else does. We, as a community, as a society, spend a ton of time storytelling. I mean, even the way that we look at social media is called stories. And we need them now more than ever. It's really hard to break out of your friend bubble. Even as a mom, I found myself in my Grays Lake community being friends with my daughter's moms, and I love them, and they're great friends, but we're all kind of the same. And I know that I can't grow in my thinking and evolve as a person if I stay with people who are like me all the time. And so through the storytelling that I've done, I have met people who don't look like me, who don't think like me, who have different backgrounds than me, and it's made me a better person, not from being on a stage telling stories, but from being in the audience and listening to these people share theirs. It's a way that we can relate to each other, and it's long been used as ways to get people thinking about viewpoints beyond their own, as well as to express our experiences. When you share something and someone else has experienced that feeling, that emotion, it makes you feel less alone. And I think all of us collectively want to feel like we're not alone in the world when we are going through those hard things in life or those funny things in life. When you're writing a story, these are the things that they say to consider. I'm sure your English teachers say similar things: to have plot, purpose, people, and place. And everybody has that. Everybody is a storyteller. That's what I love about the MOTH and storytelling events. It's not experts, it's not comedians, it's not people who've spent hours on stage rehearsing lines. It's people sharing their stories about the human condition, and that's it. And we all have that because we're all here living life together. I've always journaled too, and so that has helped me kind of go back to write stories about times like when I was in high school, which I'm going to share with you today. I'm not going to go through all of this simply because I think we're not going to have time. But your stories are needed. You need to have stories to start friendships and relationships. You learn about the people that you care about, new people in your class, new people on your team. You need stories for college essays. So many stories for college essays. Different ones, different scholarships. You need to tap into the meaning that those experiences you had up until this point and put it into a story. Same thing for interviews. I've sat on enough interviews and been a part of enough interviews to know you're gonna be put on the spot to talk about that time. What is something that you did that you didn't think you could do? What is a challenge that you overcame? And you've gotta just like come up with that on the spot with everyone looking at you. Those are stories. 5 minutes. Okay, so I'm just gonna stop. These are places I've gotten to tell stories in Springfield through policy work. I'll just get to where I'm going. The story I'm gonna tell was for a theme called Tragedy, and it was about when my dad donated all of my clothes to the Salvation Army when I was in high school. And I'm gonna keep this up here because I want you to know that you can share your story at Pizzeria DeVille. And this is the details about it on Wednesdays. Okay. Normally I would have this memorized, but Mr. Tooley asked me to read it since it's Writers Week. So I started high school with a goal in mind. I wanted to redefine myself. I grew up in a small town in central Illinois, and from 7 to 13, I was the only girl on a boys' baseball team. I lived in cleats, I climbed trees, and I thought being a tomboy was pretty great. Until it wasn't, because I did not get invited to my friend's birthday party in 8th grade because I was too much like one of the guys. So I knew that something needed to change. And I had lots of cute clothes at home. Like my mom was someone who had incredible style. I just preferred up until that point to wear like my NBA Charlotte Hornets starter jacket. My mom believed that how you presented yourself mattered. And when I was in 8th grade, she bought me the Jordan grape turquoise and purple Jordans. And we have like family photos in our house where I'm wearing a United Colors of Benetton popped collar, my little brother with his fisherman Irish sweater, and my other brother Ben in his Ralph Lauren rugby. Like, we were freaking adorable. But also, another part of that is that for most of my childhood, my mom was also battling metastatic breast cancer. And she was diagnosed when I was 6. So for 7 years, she would drive from our small town 30 miles to Champaign to get radiation treatment. Every few months, she'd take her with me, and we'd start the morning with the purple lines and burns on her chest from the radiation, and then we'd go to lunch, Taco Bell or Olive Garden, and then we'd shop. We'd always stop at Orange Julius first. This is pre-Starbucks, so that was our Starbucks. And then we'd hit up the Gap, the Limited, the Buckle, all of the cool University of Illinois stores, and we would sing songs from Carly Simon all the way home. And those are some really important core memories that I had with my mom. And at the time, I thought that these were all just kind of like fun mother-daughter shopping trips, but looking back, I realized that during my 8th grade year, we went shopping a lot, like every couple of weeks. I thought she was just being generous, but she was really making sure that I had enough clothes to last as long as possible. Because a few weeks before my 8th grade graduation, she died. And suddenly, my dad was raising 3 kids by himself. And my tomboy body also changed over the summer between 8th grade and freshman year. I hit puberty, I grew 4 inches, and puberty hit me. So while I had a closet full of clothes to start freshman year, all of the work my mom did to prep me for high school was for naught because nothing fit. And my dad was super overwhelmed. Grief, work, life, everything. So I did not ask him for much. But I was lucky because I had friends who would let me borrow clothes all the time. But eventually that got a little old and embarrassing. And so I asked my dad if we could go shopping. And he said, no, but don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And by taking care of it, what that meant is boxes started appearing on our porch. And this is way before the internet or Amazon. The things that were arriving were not Lucky jeans or Gerbeau jeans or flannel shirts and bodysuits that all my friends were wearing. The things that were arriving came from catalogs, mail order catalogs called Spiegel and Chadwick's of Boston. And what my dad would do is he would see a woman in the picture, and instead of just ordering like the sweater or the pants, he would order the whole outfit. So I had like penny loafers, opaque tights, turtlenecks and like paisley cardigans with shoulder pads and culottes. And if you don't know what culottes are, it's kind of what happens when pants and a skirt make a deeply confusing compromise. My friends looked like they were going to a Nirvana concert, and I looked like I was going to process payroll. Another thing about this time is that my dad refused to get rid of anything that belonged to my mom. Like literally every single thing that she owned was still in our house. Her pill bottles, her perfume, her jewelry box, and her clothes. And I realized one day during junior year, like, duh, I could be wearing my mom's clothes. So when my dad wasn't home, and I know the bell's about to ring, so we'll kind of wrap it up. Basically, I went in, started wearing her clothes. My dad found out, he got super pissed, grounded me, told me I couldn't wear the clothes, and I had to quit basketball, and I got a job, and I started buying my own clothes because I was not wearing penny loafers and culottes. And when I came home from a spring break trip, senior year, I had a softball trip. It is no time. Sorry.